So I want you to start thinking about this notion of our operating system, because as you think about it, then you can start to get a handle on it. And then you could start to really think about, well, what kind of operating system do I want to have? What kind of operating system should society have? How can we build a better operating system? So now what I want to do in the remaining 15 minutes is to just generally answer overall some of the issues that came up frequently in the questions that many of you submitted, and that's relating to the idea of actually what does it mean to be deprogrammed from an operating system, and is that even possible, or is it even something desirable? Um, and secondly, issues about relational non-dualism. I talked about non-dualism in the theory video, and several of you brought that up. And third is, in a sense, does spirituality come out of animality? That kind of question. And fourth is about this conceptualization of body, mind, and spirit. So the first is, so um, I said, yeah, I want you to be deprogrammed. And so, of course, actually, I mean, I'm just exaggerating, or maybe, no, I'm not exaggerating, but I want to be provocative here, okay? So obviously it's impossible for you to be deprogrammed because, I mean, in fact, our own DNA is a kind of a program. And from the more, we have our biological program, so to speak. And then when we get into society, we get into our social program. And it's actually literally impossible to, to completely deprogram yourself. But nonetheless, these programs, I mean, our biological program, we can't change it. But the kinds of programs, our mental programs, our cultural and social programs, all of this is something that we actually we have some power over it. When you were a child, you had no power over it. You were being nurtured, and you were being programmed. But now you're out there, and you're part of building society. So you're part of building the program of society. So what should it be? And the best way to start with that is to really, in a sense, question everything. And so in a sense, this is the scientific method. This is Descartes, when he talks about you have to doubt everything. So really what that means, you have to doubt the program, um, and um, and then, to what extent, or, can you try to step out of the program? And even that is actually impossible, to completely step out of the program. But again, once the program, or once the operating system, you turn it into your object of consciousness. So you step back and look at it. So in a sense, that's how you kind of deprogram yourself. And then you realize what parts of it are not good, what parts of it are not good for yourself. So how could you you gradually remove that from yourself? What parts of it are good, or what would be better ways of doing things, right? So in a sense, to say deprogram means to, in a sense, start taking control, or start being an active builder of the operating system, and not simply passively not passively letting yourself being programmed. So this is the first point I wanted to make about deprogramming or deprogramming. And then the related question was about, actually, wouldn't it be bad if we kind of deprogrammed ourselves, or build our own operating system that's not the same as society's, right? So then we would actually be rejected or marginalized. And so actually the way I see things is that, on the one hand, actually you need to learn how to function within society's current operating system. That's the one thing. So there is the operating system, and you have to learn that operating system. You have to learn how to operate it. Doesn't matter if it's good or if it's bad, because that's the one we live in, and we have to learn it. And so that's what you guys are all doing. But at the same time, and I really believe so, and I know some of you had doubts about that, but I think this operating system is really falling apart. And so, so while we're in one operating system, kind of in parallel, we have to start building something else. So in a sense, you're kind of in two at the same time. One is the currently existing one, and one is the other one that you're kind of gradually sewing together, gradually helping to create. And that requires a lot of really reflecting, what kind of operating system is good for us, good for society, good for the world. And it requires a lot of discussion, a lot of reflection, a lot of experimentation, but we've got to do it. And so it's a kind of a parallel process, simultaneous to existing in the current operating system. So at the one hand, it's good to be right in a sense. So this is my attitude. You know, on the one hand, is to be very critical of the existing operating system, and to really be working on something different and something new. But at the same time, you know, I live in this operating system, you know, in the University of Hong Kong, and functioning very well in it, you know, and we should learn how to function well in the current system as well. So yeah, so that's how I see it personally, in two parallel kind of processes. Um, okay, then the other question, and it's kind of related to that, is on the non-dualism. So I mentioned this was in the theory video, so maybe some of you didn't watch it, but a number of you did and really asked this question. So I mentioned that um, uh, you know, one of the problems with many of the operating systems that exist in society is that they tend to have a dualism. In other words, always dividing things into two, and then causing conflicts between concepts, conflicts between different groups of people. And there's something about the structure and the way the operating system is designed that consciously or unconsciously, it actually generates what I call conflict systems. So if you want to know a little bit more about that idea, watch the T1 Theory 1 video on operating systems. But so I said that we need to seek for a kind of a non-dualist operating system. In other words, an operating system that doesn't create division, that is not based on dualism. But then, of course, so several of you wrote, but is that not actually impossible, right? And in fact, a very good argument that it's impossible is that just right now, I created a dualism between the old operating system and something new that we should create, right? So, so am I not creating a division? So this is why I talk about relational non-dualism. So in actually, and this is where we start looking into some of the spiritual and religious traditions in the world. And in many of the world's religious traditions, in a sense, the highest ideal is one of non-dualism, although expressed in different ways. So, for example, in Christianity, you know, Jesus Christ is the incarnation of God. So what that means is that the dualism between God and human in the flesh is completely resolved. No dualism between God and the material world, the created world. So Jesus is in a state of absolute non-dualism, completely combines God and the human, the fleshly human. In Buddhism, you also have this non-dualism of completely letting go of all ideas and everything, so that there's no division between yourself and the world, no division whatsoever. And in Taoism, we have similar ideas. Now, these ideas are, in a sense, but for us, you know, we're not Jesus and not Buddha, and you know, we won't achieve this kind of non-dualism, and perhaps it's just an ideal. Nonetheless, again, the ideal becomes an object of consciousness that can influence us in a certain way. So it can draw us to seek for a more non-dualistic way of doing things. And here's where I want to get to an example. So some of you actually raised the question, well, for example, looking into I said, reach in to listen to your body and listen to your spirit. But isn't it true that sometimes the body draws you in one direction and the spirit draws you in another direction? I know I have to finish my assignment. My spirit tells me that I've got to do it, but my body won't move. Right? So it seems that we have these contradictions. So how could we say that it is all one whole? I said that body, mind, and spirit are all one whole, but they have these contradictions. So one way of thinking non-dualistically, though, is, well, let's just look at the world, for example. I mean, let's think about breathing. So actually, when you breathe, you have to breathe in and you have to breathe out. And when you breathe in, what you have to do at that time is to breathe in. And that is in total contradiction with breathing out. And it's actually utterly impossible to breathe in and breathe out at the same time. So there's a real, and when you're breathing in, the good thing to do is to breathe in. It's not, and you shouldn't breathe out while you're breathing in. Otherwise you'll die, right? So there's only one good thing to do, which is to breathe in. But once you finish breathing in, well, the only good thing to do is to breathe out. And so life is actually about breathing in and breathing out. So at one level, you could say that there's a contradiction, a dualism between breathing in and breathing out. But actually breathing in and breathing out are part of one whole, right? Um, or also think about walking. Actually, um, when you're walking, one of your legs is going forward and the other one of them, let's say your right foot is on the ground and the left one is rising and moving forward. And so actually that's creating an imbalance in your body. It's actually creating an imbalance. Your left and right feet are in different places going in different directions. And they are actually destabilizing your body. So in order to then restore your stability, your right foot will then get up and move forward. And it's actually going to once again destabilize your body in another direction. So your two legs are actually always going in different directions and they're in different places. And yet, that's what makes us move forward. So rather than saying that my left foot and my right foot are in conflict, actually, they are doing what they should be doing at a certain time. So their differences can be coordinated. Their differences can be coordinated. So similarly, our body, our mind, and our spirit are different, and sometimes they actually very much do go in different directions, but they can be coordinated. And just like you can't live with only, or you can't live normally with only one leg, you need two. Um, well, we need both. We need, our spirit, our body, and our mind, even though they go in different directions at different times. So that's how one way of thinking about how to, in a sense, how to deal with the fact that we both have part of us are actually pulling us in different directions, and yet at the same time, they're actually part of one whole. And so actually, as we continue in this course, you'll get to think a little bit more about some of those specific contradictions, such as between the body and the spirit. So one of you who asked, right, yeah, but what if, I have sexual desires and my spirit is telling me no, and these kinds of things. So we'll actually have a chance to think about more about these kinds of questions. So finally, I wanted to mention that, so concepts are objects of consciousness. So if I say that we are made of, you are body, mind, and spirit, what I'm just putting out three ideas there: body, mind, and spirit. But actually, these are just ideas that divide reality in a certain way. But there are other ideas that could divide reality in another way. So another concept that is quite common is more dualistic. You have mind and body, for example. Or in Chinese thinking, you have hun and po, right? You have san hun, si po, four hun and three hun and four po, right? So there are many, many ways of dividing who we are. Actually, who we are is far too complex for any of these concepts. So as some of you mentioned, well, what about emotion? So any conceptual framework is going to be too simplistic because human being is more than any concept. So concepts are tools that help us to simplify reality so that we can see things clearly. But when we do that, that leads us to forget about certain things. And so we have to remember that the concepts are just instruments, they're just tools. And we should use them to help us to understand, but we shouldn't get too strongly attached to them. Um, and um, um, Yeah, so that's about the, there's more I could say, and I hope I will be able to do another theory video a little bit more about these three concepts of body, mind, and spirit. And finally, though, I wanted to, there was the question of, well, is the spirituality, does it emerge from materiality? And maybe you could say that. So clearly in the, you know, let's look at the evolution of all of life, right? So we had pure matter, and then at some point in history, you know, life emerged. But now life is qualitatively different from pure matter, right? So life is a certain kind of organization and dynamic in matter. So once life emerged, even though it emerged out of matter, life is something that's completely different. And then when we have the intellect that emerges, so you could say that, you know, it emerged out of living beings, you know, human beings with intellect, and yet intellect is qualitatively different from simple life, right? And spirit is also qualitatively different from simple intellect. So these things emerge, you know, in the process of geological time. They emerge out of each other, but actually you have a qualitative change or a qualitative addition. And then when you add that qualitative new power, it actually transforms what came under it. So a living being like a plant is actually, it just completely, the life in the plant transforms the material structure. Now, so for human beings with our intellect, well, obviously we can transform the structure of matter and life through using our intellectual powers. And with our spiritual powers, then we also transform the directions of our lives, the purpose and directions of our lives. We create meaning and so on. So we're always adding new capacities onto what previously existed. So our time is up. Don't hesitate to ask, send us the questions. I loved your questions. We will give you more guidance on how to formulate your questions for the assessment. But anyway, for the time being, don't worry because we'll choose your 4 best questions. So, but I'll tell, now we don't have enough time, but I'll tell you more about how to formulate a really good question for your assessment. So thanks a lot. And there will be 2 more video clips associated with this week, and we'll upload them probably tomorrow or after tomorrow. So, all right, see you next week.